Hey girl, Marissa here. You are listening to the Codependent Dummy podcast. As a young woman, you have been raised, reinforced, and rewarded for putting the needs of others above your own. Now, in your 20s, you're finding yourself exhausted, exasperated, and enveloped in shit relationships, especially the one you have with yourself. Codependency is a way of being where we put the feelings, wants, and needs of others above our own in an unconscious attempt to meet our own feelings, wants, and needs. Sorry to break it to you, sis, but that is not sustainable. This podcast is to help you undo all that so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. Let's get to it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Codependent Dummy podcast. Today, we are sitting with Lisa Hammett. Lisa is an international best-selling author, TEDx speaker, and a success coach, helping stressed and burned out business owners and executives develop mental fitness, manage stress and anxiety, and get healthy. She is a certified life coach and is currently getting her certification in positive intelligence. Her international best-selling book, From Burnout to Best Life, is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other distribution channels, which we will be diving into today. So yes, Lisa, thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome. All right, so we'll start with the typical two. I'm curious, Lisa, how do you conceptualize the term codependency?
I conceptualize it as taking loyalty to a very dysfunctional level.
Mm-hmm.
So it's when there is a relationship, and it could be more one dominant, but really there's a dependency on both parts where you support really goes to a dysfunctional level where it's no longer providing peace. You can't be your complete self, meaning your authentic self.
Right.
And communication inevitably breaks down as a result. And it can be from all different causes, not just, like chemical dependency. It could just be a friendship and so forth.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And I know the listeners, this podcast in of itself is challenging the narrative that it's strictly with chemical dependency, and it can be friendships. It can be at work. It can be with siblings and not with parents or vice versa. Yeah, it can manifest in many different ways. Yeah. All right. So taking loyalty, which we want to be loyal in our relationships, to a very dysfunctional level. I'm curious, any examples of that come to mind for you? How can loyalty become dysfunctional?
I will use an example in my personal life that occurred actually during the pandemic. One of my best friends and I, we spent almost every day together. And it was a great relationship and friendship until it wasn't. And it got to the point of where we couldn't be ourselves. We felt like if we said certain things, we would trigger the other person. But it really started from kind of a mutually dependent relationship in the sense that my friend moved to the area. She didn't know a lot of people. So she relied on me because I'm pretty well connected in the community, to introduce her to people. And then we just really embraced her into our family, and she came over for regular dinners, and it was great. until it wasn't. And I was going through kind of a transition before I launched my coaching practice where I was kind of not really sure. I had toyed with the idea of going out on my own. I was in the direct selling world. I enjoyed what I did, but I wasn't fully satisfied. And she helped kind of fill that void. So there was that dependency on my end that she kind of helped fill that void that was missing and was a great support system. But then it got to the point where we were spending so much time with each other that we each kind of felt that the other person should know what we were thinking. And you can never fully know what somebody's thinking. So we wouldn't share certain things or what upset us because we were afraid that if we said something to the other person, it might trigger them or, cause an argument that we just didn't want to go down that path. And then it just got to be more and more dysfunctional until it ended up in just kind of a blowout situation where things were said that were very hurtful, and it actually ended our friendship for a couple years. And now we have, we've both grown and recognized that had we done a better job communicating and kind of expressing what we needed, not assuming, and kind of being other focus as opposed to, well, this is what I need, it could have prevented this from happening. So it was a really good learning experience. I know that might be kind of different from other people who might be living with somebody who is an alcoholic or is addicted to drugs. But in that, it's kind of in that same vein. It's that both parties have this need from that other person.
Right.
And ultimately that need is not met. And that's where the disconnect starts to happen.
Totally. And, I asked for specifics, like how loyalty can turn to dysfunction, and you're listing it, right? So loyalty can turn to dysfunction when things are unspoken, right?
Yes.
You both mutually kept things from yourself.
Yes.
When we rely on mind reading or like need reading. So she should know my needs and I should know hers. And then if we don't, we're upset. So resentment, another part of loyalty turning into dysfunction. And then a buildup, right? This buildup of what was unsaid or the needs that were unmet, and it turns into a blowout. That's dysfunction.
Very much so.
Yeah. And this total rupture in the relationship. Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts on that friendship and experience?
At the time it was awful, and we both have talked about it since then, that it was almost like a really toxic divorce. I mean, situations like this can occur in a marriage or, a relationship with a partner. And, it boils down ultimately to communication, and that we're not fully communicating, and that we are expecting certain things, but we're not sharing what we're expecting. And Brene Brown is one of my favorite authors, and she talks about this a lot in communication. It's like you can't set expectations for other people if you don't communicate those expectations to them. So, if I'm putting an expectation on you that, oh, you should know that I'm not feeling well today or that I'm sad, but I'm not telling you that I am feeling that way, how can I expect you to really understand how I'm feeling? You fully can't. You might have an idea, but you're not going to know. We're not mind readers. And unfortunately, when we get in close relationships with people, we seem to think that the other person is a mind reader, and that is absolutely not the case.
Well, I think too, this has come up before with codependence. Sometimes we actually have we have been really attuned to others, where we have been able to need read or mind read, Like we're like, but then we're so other focused that we actually aren't in touch with our needs. And so
true.
I think we hope that others will do the same, but we're just busy taking care of their needs. They're getting their needs met. So no one's thinking about us.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not reciprocal. And that absolutely, it can be a very bad situation.
Yeah, I'm curious. I've had very similar experiences in codependent friendships. And I'm curious, yeah, for the listener, how were you two able to repair it?
It boiled down to forgiveness ultimately. And forgiveness is hard. And a lot of people think that you have to forgive what happened, but really forgiveness is more about yourself and letting go and just recognizing that if you continue to hold this resentment toward this other person, you're just going to be burdened and it's really going to impact other areas of your life. And you're really doing forgiveness more for yourself. And an example of that are individuals who have lost somebody, maybe due to a gun shooting. And, they choose to forgive the shooter. And that's an extreme example, but they choose to forgive them because they're like, I can't continue to harbor this resentment anymore because it is so unhealthy. I have to let it go. And it's letting it go. And we both recognize that. And we both went through a lot of self-development as well. So it was learning to forgive and then learning to communicate again. And it was baby steps. And I'm not saying everything is rosy, but we've come to a really great understanding and really have learned so much about each other and how we just can't have certain expectations. And if we're bothered by something, we have to communicate it, even if it's difficult, so.
Even if it's difficult. Yeah. So forgiveness, baby steps in rebuilding, communication. I do hear like a mutual sense of how you both contributed. So
yes.
Yeah, if she didn't have that and it was all your fault, that would be harder. But yeah, you two have both worked on developing and growing. And so you're able to bring that. And then this mutual commitment to, we talk about interdependency a lot on the podcast. And that's what you two are fostering.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Wow. All right. Well, let's dive into the book, everyone. So Lisa's book, From Burnout to Best Life, How to Take Charge of Your Health and Happiness. I have 4 quotes. So what we're going to do is I'm going to read a quote, ask a couple questions, and that's how we'll digest some of the book.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. On page 72, when we say yes to something, we're saying no to something else. By always saying yes, we're allowing others to control our lives. Okay, that's the quote. The question is, do you sense that codependents often say yes to others while unknowingly, unintentionally saying no to ourselves, no to our thoughts, our feelings, and needs? So that's like one question. And then how do you help your clients mean yes when they say yes and no when they say no?
Oh, good question. Okay, so yes, I would agree that in a codependent relationship, especially when it's starting to go awry, it is definitely because we don't want to rock the boat. And I can say that my friend and I experienced this as well, that we probably said yes to certain things that we really didn't want to do, but we did it because we felt it would be pleasing to the other person and our needs weren't being met at the time, because we just wanted to try to make things more positive. And instead of communicating how we felt, saying, I really don't want to do this. Because I think what tends to happen sometimes, it's in the way in which you say it. And it can be hard for people to say no, because we all want to be liked.
Right.
And we don't want to let other people down, especially people that we're close to. And in a codependent relationship, at least at one time, we were very close to that individual. And it's hard because we feel that we're kind of letting that other person down, and that, okay, it's just easier in the long run to just say yes. But what happens when we consistently do this is we start to build resentment, and that resentment will manifest in other ways. And in our case with my friend, we just blew up. Well, I blew up. I'll take full ownership for that, which led to just a really ugly conversation, and it was very hurtful for both of us. And you know, you can't allow that to happen. So how I work with clients on this, it's really along the lines of setting boundaries, setting healthy boundaries, because a lot of the people that I work with are people pleasers. And I don't mean a people pleaser necessarily who is, they can't think for themselves. They're just always saying yes, for somebody else. But in the workplace, for example, it could be, well, if I say no, I'm not going to look like a team player. It could reflect poorly on my job performance or my promotability. And I can't do that. Or it's a family member. I mean, you have to, because it's a family member. No, you don't. So it's really learning how to say it in such a way. And it's the first several times you do it, it's hard. And that fight or flight response may come in where your heart is pounding and you're sweating and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I can't do this. But I have found that when you're honest, and you don't have to give like a huge long-winded explanation, but when you are honest, the other person, especially if they are truly close to you, they're going to be receptive. So it's learning to say things in such a way, that it's honest. And like in the work environment, for example, because I deal with executives and high-level business owners, it's saying no, but offering a solution. So if somebody is giving them a project, and you know that you can't complete that project within a certain amount of time because you have so many other priorities that are taking precedence, then it's okay. I'm concerned about saying yes to this because X, Y, and Z won't get done on time. And, that was the expectation. So I'm suggesting if I can push one of those to maybe a couple days out, then I can complete this task or recommend somebody else who could help with it. So it's providing a solution. Right. So you're not just saying no. Right. No, sorry. So that appears like you would not be a team player if you're just saying no, Right. And then personally, an example that I have used a lot is, let's say around the holidays or a time that's really busy, you have a really full schedule, and there's one night at home that you can spend either by yourself to kind of rest and recharge, or with your family, and you've kind of protected that time. And somebody contacts you that you haven't seen in a while, and you really love this person, and they say, oh, let's go out on this date. And, a lot of people feel obligated, and they're like, oh, I have to say yes. I can't say no to this person. I love this person. Well, yes, you have to protect yourself, and you can be honest and say, oh my gosh, I would love to, but this is my only night at home. My schedule's so full. I really need to spend this at home. Well, if that person is close to you and understands you, they're not going to go, oh, are you kidding? No, come on, do it. And if they start to do that, then there's somebody who really shouldn't be in your life anyways, because they're not valuing you as a person and your needs. It's all about them and what they want.
Yeah.
So.
And the solution too, for the personal example, might be like, I have like this 8 a.m. like coming up, like, let's get coffee. Or again, like, I do appreciate this emphasis on, right, how do you help your clients say yes or no when they mean yes or no? And you're like, it's in the way
Yes.
in which they say it, right? Learning how to say it. And I love this, offering solutions. Because yeah, I think codependence, we tend to interact with the world in extremes. I talked about this in a solo cast that aired, and it's either yes or no, we stay or we go, we're in or we're out. And yeah, I was talking with a patient recently, and she like endured this day, right? She had all these obligations, but she had this huge deadline that she found out like midday. And so she like continued to endure and just take it, and ended up staying up late, like, losing sleep, sloppily putting something together. And I said, what would it have been like to either arrive late to your evening plans or leave early? And she's like, what? Like, like but it really is like being able to say no potentially and then offer a solution, right? So no, I can't come at that time, but I'll be there. Like, I'll catch up with you guys a little after. Or yes, I can come, but I have to leave a little early. Like, yeah, the offering solutions, I think, is such an important way to acknowledge your needs and the needs of the other person.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. Learning how to say it. All right. Next quote. So from page 85. If boundaries are not set and balance is not maintained, it can lead to serious mental and physical health problems. End of quote. What serious mental and physical problems have you observed in your coaching clients who struggle with aspects of codependency? Can you provide an example of a client whose health actually improved as a consequence of setting boundaries?
Absolutely. So I would say the majority of my clients, not all, but the majority come to me because of stress, chronic stress, and they're either at burnout or they're close to burnout. And just for the audience sake, the viewers here, I went through burnout in 2005. So I'm very well versed on what happens when you reach burnout, and most often your health, really suffers. And the people that I coach, again, they're often like high level executives, and there's this expectation that they have to, do something. Or if they're a high performing, business owner, they might be performing fairly well in their business, but their personal life is a complete wreck because they're not saying no, and their life is completely out of balance. And usually what happens when that occurs is your health is really suffering physically and emotionally, and you feel like your life is out of control. And the thought of even taking a 15-minute break seems ridiculous because you can't get everything done as it is. So it's really learning to put things in priority and really recognize there are things that you can say no to. You have allowed yourself to create an expectation, whether it's with your employers or your family or friends, that you are accessible 24/7, or when you get home from work, that there's absolutely no time to decompress. I'll use an example of a client quite a while ago. She was the primary breadwinner in the family, and her husband, he worked, but he worked from home, and he really kind of helped with the kids. So she came home, and her job, very stressful, and she talked to a lot of people. Well, she was exhausted, and she shared with her husband and her family. She said, when mom gets home, I need 15 minutes, or I need 30 minutes. I can't remember if it was 15 or 30. It doesn't really matter, but I need that time. I'm going to go into my room. I'm just going to decompress. And then after that, you have 100% of my attention. I am turning off my phone. I am not talking to anybody else, but I need you to do this for me. And they realized that by doing this, she would be more present with them. Right. And it just made for a much better situation. So that's a personal example. Mm-hmm. But, and oftentimes when we are workaholics and we, eat through, we don't even take a lunch. And if we eat something, we're kind of inhaling it on the way to a meeting or what have you. Well, that is an example that you've set for yourself. You're basically telling the people you work with that it's okay for you to do that. It's okay that you don't take a break. It's okay that I get in, at 6:30 in the morning and leave at 8 p.m. at night. That's okay because that's what I have done. So, let's be fair. The employer thinks, well, if this person is willing to work that hard and they're productive, okay, we'll continue to give them work and call them at all hours. So you need to set that expectation. And I'll have to tell you, my husband, gosh, I'm really proud of him for this because I in corporate tended to be a real workaholic. And he is really good about, okay, I'm done. Doesn't matter what needs to be done. At this point, he doesn't leave if it's a major project that needs completion or, he has to follow up with somebody. It's not like, okay, no, I'm not going to talk to you. But he sets business hours and he communicates that. Well, he just won like a top president's award with his organization. Wow. And he has been setting boundaries with this organization for years since he has been working there. And he earned a president's award and he can set those boundaries. So my point with that is, yeah, I'm really proud of my husband, but you know what? You can do that too. And if in your mind, if you're listening to this and you're saying, well, I can't do that in my job, that's a lie you are telling yourself. Your brain is manufacturing a lie saying that, oh, I'm going to lose my job if I do this, or I'm not going to get promoted, or it's not going to look well. You know what? That's on you. And that's a lie that your brain is telling you.
So, and there's serious consequences.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. On page 97, we've already touched on this, but still, I'm curious to hear more. So you just, one of your directions is set healthy boundaries. Mm-hmm. What are the common boundaries you help your clients set? And we could do personal and professional. And how do you help them maintain them? Because that's one of the struggles I sense for a lot of listeners is we say, okay, I'm only going to work from 8 to 5. And then we say that on a Saturday when we're exhausted, and then come Monday and it's 6 p.m., it's 7 p.m., it's 8 p.m. And so common boundaries you help your clients set and how you help them maintain the boundary.
Great question. So we have talked about saying no, and that's like the biggest one really is learning to say no and how to go about doing that. And then the other one, and there's other things too, but I would say the second most important is really getting control of your calendar. And that sounds so basic and mundane, but it is so true. You have got to time block yourself in with the meetings that you go to and the doctor's appointments. You are really ultimately more important than those other things. Now, your employer might not agree with you, but the thing is, if you don't take care of you, you can't take care of anybody else. You can't be effective and productive at your job. You can't be a good spouse, partner, friend. You can't do anything well unless you take care of you. And as humans, we tend to put ourselves last. We allow overscheduling and other people's trying to be accommodating. That's that people pleaser thing that I talked about, trying to be accommodating to other people's needs because we want to be liked, that we do things that are inconvenient for us. So I have finally learned, I have time blocked. There are certain days that I do certain things, because when I started my business, for example, now granted, I'm not in the corporate space anymore, but I would allow anybody to basically book an appointment with me, whether it was like a networking appointment or a potential client appointment, really anytime within certain hours of the day. And I felt like I was not spending enough time doing certain tasks. So I reined that in and I said, on these 2 days, I will have availability for these types of conversations. And on other days of the week, this is when I'll do client appointments. On another day of the week, this is the day that I will keep open for personal care things like doctor's appointments, hair appointments. You know, if I get a massage, if I go to a chiropractor, if I have to go take care of my pet, you know, and if I don't have anything scheduled, then it is my choice to allow somebody to schedule, you know, time with me, dependent upon, you know, what happens. But I am fully in control. I can't tell you how freeing and stress relieving that is when you feel that you are in control of your schedule. So, what is really frustrating for me is when I hear people say that there are not enough hours in the day, that their schedule is just out of control, that if they only had more hours in the day. And I don't want to say I hate that term because that's a really strong word, but I really dislike that term because we all have the same number of hours in the day. And I'm sure you know, and our audience knows, people who are in very high profile jobs, who lead very full lives, that are not stressed and do not feel like their schedule is controlling them. Right. And, you know, this occurs when we consistently try to people please. And we may not think that necessarily we're doing that, but we are agreeing to maybe a meeting or a commitment or helping out somebody when it's really not convenient for us. And instead of sticking to that boundary and using that, you know, no with either a solution, you know, another alternative solution, or just basically saying no, we go ahead and allow ourselves to schedule at a time that really doesn't work for us. And that becomes habitual. And then we get to that point where we feel like our schedule is controlling us. Right. And it's a horrible place to be. And I felt like that, you know, for a long time until, again, I finally said, okay, enough is enough. I am going to be really intentional about how I spend my time. Right. And a good way to start with this, and what I do to work with clients, is I ask them to write down, and it doesn't have to be like this long dialogue, but just bullet points from the moment you wake up in the morning until your head hits the pillow at night. How are you spending your time? And just guesstimate on the amount of time you spend. And you are going to find time suckers within the day that you can edit. Right. So when people say I don't have enough time in the day, I would guarantee that time suckers such as social media or television watching or whatever it is that you do to decompress. And Instagram. I'm not saying don't. Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's not that you shouldn't allow yourself to decompress, but you need to figure out different ways to do that. And how can you schedule that? So I have people that find sometimes 6 hours in a day due to time suckers, which is crazy, crazy. And, you know, then with 6 hours, my gosh, you can plan better sleep. You can plan time for self-care, and it can be time blocked. It doesn't mean that you have to take 2 hours and go to the gym or go on a run or go outside. If you have a full day, maybe it's 15 minutes here, 10 minutes here, whatever it is, it's enough to kind of clear your head and get you to refocus. So I help them through that exercise. and get them into time blocking and then scheduling it in their phone, so this is my break time. This is when I'm going to do this, barring a natural disaster or a family emergency. This is what I'm sticking to. So yeah.
And
does that help?
Totally.
Okay.
And then the implementation, how do you help them navigate the pseudo emergencies the pseudo fires that I think codependents can get really distracted by?
Absolutely. It boils down to recognizing really what is a fire, because again, our brain, the majority of the thoughts that our brain manufactures are not truthful. Hate to say that, but that's reality. So if we're saying, oh, this has to take priority, it probably doesn't. So it's learning to really understand what is truly important. And is there an implication, an immediate implication if this is not handled right away? And it's learning to prioritize. If this does require precedence, okay, then what needs to shift? And you would think that high level, executives would never have to deal with this, but they do, because they get fires all the time. Right. And it's a fact of life. It's a fact of life. So,
right. So distinguishing what is a fire.
Yes.
And what can wait, what can wait until the next scheduled time block that you have set out to deal with. You could even do like you could block out like mini fires in your calendar, and like
Absolutely.
this is when I address the mini fires.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love that, because that is planning for the unexpected. Right. And that's a hard concept for some people to understand who are really logical. They're like, well, how can I plan for the unexpected if I don't know what's going to occur? Well, what your situation is like at work, or at home. Maybe you have a child that has, special needs or whatever it is, but the types of challenges that can arise. So imagine that situation. How can you react to it more favorably? So you're kind of pre-planning ahead of time so that when the situation arises, you're not as stressed, you're not reacting, you have a plan in place.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah. All right. Last quote on page 110. As humans, we want to be liked. When we are rejected, it's defeating. When we are rejected, I might have put defeating twice. To avoid rejection, we may suppress our true selves, become inauthentic, live a lie, allowing fear of rejection to keep us safe. What are the initial steps you take to help your clients start to live more authentically? It's twofold, but it's really the same. Living authentically while letting go of the fear of rejection.
Oh, yes. Often when I work with a client, I would say most times, the first thing that we do before we even come up with, a plan of attack for what it is that they want to accomplish, it's really having an understanding of their fears, or in their mind, their limitations. Or if they're procrastinating, why are they procrastinating? Because ultimately that's a fear of rejection or a fear of failure. You put off something that you don't want to do because it's uncomfortable and there's a lot of friction involved. And it's usually because we're fearful that we will not look favorably, that other people would not look at us favorably, or that we would be rejected. So a lot of people don't really understand that concept. Sometimes they're like, I'm not fearful of anything, because they might feel very confident in work. And you could be fearful in certain aspects of your life, but not in other aspects of your life. But you can also have like a major fear of success or failure that then can permeate all areas of your life. So it depends on the person. It really depends on the person. But it's really focusing on that first. And, if a person is challenged in some way, and they usually are when they come to me because they obviously need some assistance, it's like, what is the biggest struggle for you? And why is that hard for you? And really just digging down. And this doesn't happen right away. This could take, multiple coaching sessions to really unearth this. And I'm sure you experience all this all the time with your clients as well, that it's not a superficial conversation because, and it doesn't always occur this way, but sometimes it stems from a situation that occurred when we were younger, or it might not. It may not. It could just be that we're predisposed for a certain type of tendency. And it might not have anything to do with a dysfunctional relationship that you had as a child growing up with your parents. So it could be either, but it's really recognizing what the issue is and where it's stemming from. So what are those triggers? And once you have awareness of that, it's like the clouds part and you start to see some light, and it's different. And then once you understand that it's there, then you can start working on, okay, is it truthful? No. Most of the time it's not. And if worst case scenario, okay, so let's say you start your own business. There's a huge fear of failure here. Okay, you could fail. Your business might not be successful. So what's the absolute worst thing that could happen? And you think about that. But then, and this is where the positive intelligence that I focus on kind of comes into play, it's everything has a gift and opportunity. We may not see it at the time, but everything has a gift and opportunity. So imagine the worst case scenario, but what could be the underlying gift and opportunity? So I'm going to use just a really basic example that I'm sure we've all experienced. So imagine we wake up one morning and we have to get to a meeting and we notice we have a flat tire. Okay, so irritating and annoying. We're like, okay, now I'm going to be late to my meeting. And then we just go down this negative diatribe. So what's the gift and opportunity in this situation? Well, the gift and opportunity could be, instead of getting on the highway where you could get an accident and have a blowout, it occurred at home. So you were safe and you got it taken care of. And okay, so you might be late to a meeting, but you can kind of mentally prepare while you're waiting. You have enough time that you could communicate what happened, and so that you arrive calmer and more prepared and not rushed. So that's kind of a basic example, but it's really learning those gifts and opportunities.
Wow. And I sense that getting in touch with what we're most afraid of, like thinking about, feeling about, imagining that, moving towards this positive intelligence. Okay, what are the gifts and opportunities if that does happen? How can that, or how have you seen that create or give your clients permission to live more authentically?
So I'll just use social media as an example. Rarely do we show our true selves on social media. Again, it goes back to, we might see a glimmer of the person, but you don't see the whole person, because again, you want to present an image and you want to be liked. So, and we do this by the things that we say and the people that we associate with. And oh my gosh, we would never say that because that could be offensive, and I'm not saying to be mean spirited and say something that would be hurtful to somebody. But again, it's that underlying fear of rejection and people pleasing. And when you don't live into your true authentic self, you never feel fulfilled. You are anxious, you're stressed. Oftentimes it leads to depression, and you have a breakdown in communication, and it can just manifest in health issues. And it kind of goes back to what I was sharing earlier, with my friend. It can lead to resentment because we're not being authentic, we're not sharing what has upset us, because we don't want to rock the boat, and we're like, okay, so we're not going to say this, and then it just exacerbates the problem. And if we are so concerned about superficially what we look to other people, we will never have deep, meaningful relationships, bottom line. And in order to have a deep, meaningful relationship, and that doesn't mean it has to be a marriage, or it could be just an open, honest dialogue with a mentor, or it could be a friend, or it could be somebody at work. But you have got to be authentic. And I'm not saying that you dump every single thing in your life,
Right.
but you can't compromise your values because you're fearful of how it's going to look. And that in the workplace, that often happens, is because we get pigeonholed in certain jobs, and we're like, well, we need this job for this money, but that job is not aligned with our values. So we're not living authentically at work because we're not living into our values. And it often ends in dissatisfaction and burnout and unnecessary stress. So it's really understanding how that happens. And if the individual is repeatedly struggling to have like intimate relationships, and I'm not saying sexual per se, but any kind of, intimacy, shared dialogue, really open, honest conversation, then that's a serious fear of rejection. And they have to understand that unless you're willing to be empathetic and to be vulnerable, and it's scary. It's scary. I admit, sometimes putting yourself out there is like, oh my gosh, this is really terrifying. But if you don't, you don't experience how wonderful those relationships can be, and how meaningful and really how fulfilling your life can be.
Right.
So it's really understanding that, because I deal with a lot of left brain people who are very analytical, and empathy and emotions can be very bothersome for them because they're so task focused, and they might be very good at their jobs, but their home life is a complete train wreck because they can't show any emotion towards their family. They don't have time for that. And they get very impatient if their kids get upset about something, or their spouse. They're like, you're just being overly sensitive. Well, no, you're not being empathetic and understanding of their needs. So unfortunately, in situations like that, that's often why those relationships dissolve. So
yeah.
Okay, kind of went down a multiple path there, but
but overall, right? Like getting in touch with those fears, right? And getting in touch with the fear of rejection, especially noticing the gifts and opportunities if that does happen. Well, I guess, yeah, the fear of vulnerability, because you might be rejected, but then the gift and opportunity is a deep and meaningful relationship. Yes. And so being aware of the fear, being aware of the gift and opportunity can create more space for your clients, for listeners to live more authentically. Yeah.
And when they're more authentic, they're happier and they're healthier. And that's what they don't often get. But when they start to understand that, and I'll have them like test it out. It's like, okay, instead of just reacting to something, the next time when you hear something that might be annoying to you, just stop and really listen to what that person's saying and try to see it from their perspective. Because we're all 10% right. Bottom line, we're all 10% right.
Right.
We may not think we are, but according to that individual and their belief system and their perception, they are right. So we are all 10% right. So we have to give that grace to each other.
Yeah. Grace. So important. All right. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for coming on.
Awesome.
I appreciate you sending your book. I'm glad I got to read it to prepare. And if people are resonating with what you're saying, what are you offering the listeners today?
So the listeners get a free downloadable workbook. It does pair with the book From Burnout to Best Life. And just a little bit about the book is it integrates my journey of reaching and overcoming burnout to a happy, healthy, fulfilled life. And it includes practical tips that you can implement to help you get there. I mean, not every single aspect of the book may necessarily pertain to you, but it's broken into sections like, goal setting and vision and mindset and what you put in your body, how you move your body. So it's kind of a holistic approach to overall wellness. At the end of each chapter, there are reflection questions that kind of identify pain points, and the workbook will actually help you kind of get started. And if you're feeling stuck and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm totally stuck, it will help you kind of create a vision for your life.
Wow.
And it will ask those questions, what are your core values? What are your passions? What are your strengths? And oftentimes we don't take the time to think that. And core values can really get people stuck. They're like, I don't understand what a core value is. Well, this will kind of break it down for you. And it's very eye-opening, and it can pertain to all areas of your life, not just business or not just personal. So
totally. Yeah. Yes. All right. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And if people are curious, where else can they find you?
Probably the easiest way is to go to my website, and it's easy because you see my name here. It's lisahammett.com. So it's very easy, and you'll learn a little bit about my story. I'm also a professional speaker, and there's a link for the book, so we'll give you a little bit more information on the book. And then I also blog, so you'll have access to blog posts, and sign up for my newsletter, and you can, if you want to chat, you can, connect that way too. So that's probably the best way.
Okay. Everyone, there will be links to the workbook and your website in the show notes. And thank you for coming on. Thank you, listener, for listening. Okay. We'll see you guys next week. Okay. Bye.
Hey girl, it's Marissa again. I'm not like a regular podcaster, I'm a cool podcaster, right? Thank you for listening and staying till the end. You can find me on Instagram at Therapy with Marissa. Email me, marissa@codependummy.com. Check out codependummy.com for more information on the show. And baby girl, a subscribe, rating, and review would be much appreciated. Till next time, I want you to remember, if you are feeling unseen, I see you. If you are feeling unheard, I hear you. And if you think that you don't matter, know that you matter to me. I want you to go out there so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. And now, the disclaimer. Girl, this is not therapy, and I am not your therapist. This podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regards to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, publisher, or guests are rendering any legal, clinical, or other professional service. If you want or need a professional, please